What is up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of Limited Resources. This is episode number 697. My name is Marshall. I'm one of your Limited Resources, and joining me on the line all the way from Denver, Colorado, it's Luis Scott-Vargas. Luis, we're back at it again, baby. Podcast number 2 on the day.
Yeah, in true LR fashion, we recorded a podcast, took a break for lunch, and then got back into the saddle, and here we are, second bite at the apple.
That's right. So earlier today, you'll see in your feed, we recorded the bonus sheet. What are they called? Something Legends from the Multiverse or whatever. Multiverse Legends bonus sheet here from March of the Machine. And that took a good enough amount of time that we decided just to make it its own standalone episode. It was, coming up on 2 hours or whatever. And because, there's a lot of complicated cards. I mean, there are all these like gold legends from, Magic's past. There's going to be a lot, or not all gold, but a lot of legends from Magic's past, and they're going to be complicated. So we took our time and went through those. But we also have had our hands on the set for a couple of days now and wanted to get you our format overview, what we used to call initial impressions. This is actually a little closer to initial impressions because we actually did just get the set more recently, or at least I did. You did the event thing, right? The streamer event.
I did the early access, and I did a bunch of drafts that day. Yeah.
Yeah. I actually had access to that, but wasn't going to stream it. So I didn't want to do that. But anyway, so we're going to do that now in this show in 697. It is the mom format overview. So we're going to be going over our first takes on a bunch of the cards and mechanics and that type of stuff, and get you, see if it lines up with what you think at home.
So I just counted how many drafts I've done. I have 15 on 17 lands, and I probably have another 10 on my phone. So,
I think I have 5. I was like fairly happy with that. But yeah, you're next level, man, no doubt about it. But hey, that's why you're a great co-host, and we're going to get your thoughts and I guess a few of mine in there as well on the show. Before we get into it, we want to thank everybody who supports us on Patreon. That is how this show is still here, frankly. And we really appreciate everybody who supports us. It's patreon.com/limited resources. And if you support us over there, you get access to the Patreon feed, which is where we ask our patrons questions for question of the week, for when we have guests, or, that type of stuff. And then also you get a thank you card and a sticker in the mail as well. And again, thank you so much for supporting us. We really do appreciate it. We are going to do crack-a-packs for this format, but we are going to hold off on them because there's a few kind of big picture things that we want to talk about. So we're going to do that chunk of the episode first. Then we're going to do our crack-a-packs, and then we'll get more into the nitty-gritty on some of the mechanics and stuff that we've been seeing. So Luis, where should we start from a bigger picture view of this format?
I think in terms of importance, start at the top, which is speed. Everyone wants to know how fast a format is, because that really dictates, what do you think when you look at Phyrexian Gargantua, 6 mana, 4/4, ETB, draw 2, lose 2, versus 2 mana, 2/1 with minor abilities?
Exactly. Because we've had formats recently where Phyrexian Gargantua would be laughably unplayable, but there are formats where that type of card is excellent.
Yeah, this is a format where I think it's closer to excellent than bad. Like, I had a black-white deck that I trophied with earlier this morning where I drafted 3 of them, started with 2, and after 2 matches, I'm like, you know what? I think what I should do here is put in as many of the low curve stuff I have. Like I had a couple of cards that I could have played, and then just play all the Gargantuas, and it actually worked out pretty well.
So you kind of polarized your curve towards everything early, and then later on slam a Gargantua and use it to power you through the late game. It's an uncommon, right?
It is an uncommon, yeah, and it goes pretty late. You get a 8th pick or whatever, which I don't think is even ridiculous. Like, it is a good card, but it is not by any stretch an unbeatable one.
We should probably read what it does.
Right? I said 6 mana, 4/4, draw 2, lose 2.
Yeah, you did mention that. Sorry.
Yeah.
So that's a hallmark of perhaps a slower format. My impression has been in the middle, but if I had to lean it in a direction, it would be towards the slower end. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, I think that there are aggro decks. Blue-white's, I think, the premier aggro deck, the Blue-White Knights deck, where sometimes you feel when you play against that deck, like you didn't have a 2-drop, you were on the draw, they got on the board, they bounced your first thing, and you're like, wow, I just got tempoed out. I've definitely felt that way against that deck.
Yeah.
But sometimes you play against the multicolor green decks, and obviously you don't have to come out super fast, though you have to deal with their big late game. You play against the Convoke decks where again, it's not like they're attacking you. They're actually using their creatures to convoke a lot of the time. So look, we're never, I say never, but obviously I can't guarantee that. I say we're never going to have a limited format in modern age where you're rewarded for not playing a card on tier 2, where your curves can start at 4 and be fine. That's not really how Magic works these days.
No.
But this is not a blazingly fast format. I don't feel like when I miss my second land drop, I'm going to lose. Or sorry, my turn 2 play, I'm going to lose. I don't feel like when I'm on the draw and they play a 1-drop, I'm going to lose. Whereas in Phyrexia, all will be 1. I felt exactly those things. If you didn't have a 1-drop on the draw, sometimes you felt behind already. And if you didn't have a 2-drop, you were almost always just going to lose. That is just not the case here in March of the Machines, where I feel like there's room for slower draws. There's room for longer games. I've had some crazy complicated games. I've had a lot of games go to decking, not like completely unaided, but there's a bunch of like mill 2, mill 3 type cards. And when a game goes long and you're drawing all our cards and people are casting those, like, yeah, it actually can go to decking, which is kind of that shows you a little bit about format speed, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's, it's too early to make anything definitive, and we'll check back on it. But I am looking at it's on the play draw advantage screen on 17 lands. And, one of the axes for the graph that it shows you is average number of turns that it takes to finish a game. And for Premier Draft, it looks like it's at 9. And
okay,
9 is mid-pack, slightly towards the faster end. Like the slowest ones that we've had are closer to 10. None of them quite get all the way to 10. But, like Strixhaven, for example, is 9.7, 9.8, somewhere in that range. That's one of the slowest ones that we've had, of late. Ikoria is 9.5, that type of thing. So this one's, look, it's not, fast. Like 1 was 8.4, which is by far the fastest of the regular sets that we've had. And this one, like I said, it's right up in the 8.9 to 9 range. So it is actually slightly towards the faster end. Like if, what I just said, my feeling is it was in the middle, but towards the slower end. It's showing currently as towards the faster end, but again, it's so early that we won't really know for a few weeks until there's more data in there. But that's interesting.
Yeah,
something to keep our eye on.
And I think that as we continue playing with the format, we're going to get a better sense of exactly how fast it is and what kind of things you can get away with. But so far, I'm drafting a curve where I can get stuff on the board. I'm making progress or attacking my opponent, but I'm not going out of my way to make sure I have 7 2-drops in every deck. You don't need to do that.
Yeah. Snowball-y. Would you describe the format in that way, where one of the questions that we had, particularly about battles, but about some of the things that the mechanics in this set, do lead you down this road where it's like, okay, I've got more creatures than you do, so I'm ahead. I play a battle. It gives me some type of advantage, hopefully on board, but on some level. Then if I use my creatures to flip the battle, now I went from using a position that was ahead because I was able to attack into the battle successfully, which meant I was ahead on board, to now further bolster my aheadness and perhaps lead to a win more or a snowball effect where it's like, the game just sort of collapses on the other player. Has that played out for you? Have you seen that yourself?
Definitely. And we can just talk about battles now that we're kind of on the subject, because I think that that's where they come in. Battles are very strong. Like a lot of the battles are great, but on the other hand, some of them don't affect the board that much when you play them, and you just kind of have to know kind of what you're trying to accomplish when you're playing these battles. Overall, the ones that are the closest to a card you would be happy playing just on its front side are the battles that you really want in your deck.
Yeah, the ones that look like removal or provide you with some board presence.
So a really good example of this actually is like Invasion of Mercadia. That's the 1 in a red battle. You can discard a card to when you play it to draw 2 cards. So it's basically Faithless Looting or Tormenting Voice or any thrill possibilities, any of whatever that card is. And then as a bonus, if you get to attack it down, you end up in a spot where you're you're getting a 3/3 that has an awesome ability, and you're really happy about that. So here, Thrill of Possibility was always like a marginal playable. You never felt that bad playing it, but the backside of the battle makes this just an awesome card, really strong.
Yeah, another one that comes to mind at uncommon is Invasion of Olgratha, which is the 4 and a black that hits something for 3, that drains something for 3, but it transforms into a 3/3 flyer that can get bigger, right? Like this is a spell that, again, this one doesn't quite meet the threshold on like you'd be happy to play the front side of this just straight up like a sorcery that did 3. It's not that far off, right? Like if it was 4, you'd probably be on. Yeah. So, it's right on that border, but you just get this upside, if you can take the thing down of like a decent 3/3 flyer out of it. This is kind of the sweet spot for me, outside of the rare ones.
Battles are one of the biggest reasons to be on the board quickly, because if you have them, then, and you like if you go 2-drop, 3-drop, they just go 3-drop, and you go like 4-drop, like Invasion of Xerix, bounce your thing, attack it.
Oh God.
Like
that already happened to me, man. Don't bring it back. Yeah, that was terrible.
But on the other hand, battles actually, I don't think are the best in the really aggressive strategies, because there you're trading face damage for board position, and you can kind of fall into a trap. I had a game where my opponent played a turn 4 Niv Mizzet Reborn, right? Off of like the Burgeoning Growth or whatever.
I did
6/6 flyer.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. And it's like, wow, that's a 6 start. But what they did is they attacked one of their battles that they played instead of me. Like an Invasion of Kaladesh or what have you. And I'm doing stuff too at the time, right? And then the next turn, they do the same thing. And they basically, by going down the attacking battles path, they're ending up in a spot where they're incentivized to continue doing that, because right now I'm still 20. But when looking back at the game, it's like, you know what? I think if they just attacked me with the 6/6 flyer 3 times, I would have died.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying it was wrong how they made their plays. I just think that it's very easy to fall into that trap kind of, and you really just have to know kind of what you're trying to accomplish. And aggro decks, I think a lot of the time don't really want to spend their time attacking battles. So consider that.
If that's the case, then would you say that aggro decks don't want battles? Like a lot of them are pretty weak as a card on the front side, like they're just okay unless you get up into the rares. Like if I told you all you're ever going to do is cast this for the front side, there's very few of the non-rare battles that you'd actually want. And even the rare ones are just okay in many cases.
Yeah, something like Invasion of Belenon, the 2 and a white makes a 2/2 knight and flips into a Glorious Anthem. Like that card does not have a very high win rate. And I think because the decks that use it don't actually want to play it that way.
I just don't think flip it. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think that that's a very productive way to do that.
But all the value decks seem to be defaulting to attack in their battles. I have defaulted to that in the decks that I'm playing that I would consider mid-range value or slow decks. I've been just wanting to get those things flipped and take advantage of that. The play patterns get interesting there too, right? One of the things that you see a lot now is you build out your board, you play the battle, and you set it up so that you can attack it immediately and get it flipped. That seems to be good, especially if the battle flips into something that can block or that matters on defense as well. That's a very tough sequence to beat, right? If they have a board that can flip a battle immediately and have it have something back, like they can't race you, you're building out your board. It actually is worth it a lot of times in that case to do so. Those sequences they're pretty devastating. Like it's really tough to come back from those.
Yeah. And the way that to use battles that I found most effective is in these like mid-range / control decks that play a creature, play a battle, don't worry too much about attacking the battle. And then you start this phase of the game where you flip a battle, and that makes it really easy to flip the next battle.
Yeah.
And you start chaining them, and then your opponent is in a lot of trouble. Yeah. And battles are strong. The strong ones are really strong, like the Invasion of Amonkhet, the blue-black one is really strong. There's a lot of battles that are well worth it, and you end up being pretty happy when you have these cards in your deck. But then you have things like the Invasion of Lorwyn, the 6-mana destroy a creature battle. That card is okay, but it's not crazy good. You just have to kind of pick your battles as it were.
Yeah, that's pretty good. What do you think about it? gameplay wise, like not strategically, but just like, is it interesting to you? Do you think that what they were going for here worked?
I do. Battles, yeah, some of the battles are really good, and some of the battles, whether they flip or not is going to be a large part of what the game is about. Mm-hmm. So in a sense, yeah, the game does kind of revolve around them, but that doesn't mean that the battles I think are too good necessarily. Like some of them are very strong and some of them aren't, just like every other kind of card. And overall, I've liked how they played. I think they're pretty cool, except for the whole Phyrexian Censor thing, which if you didn't catch the end of the last LR, my huge gripe with it is Phyrexian Censor says you can only play one non-Phyrexian spell per turn. So if you have a battle out and there's a Phyrexian Censor on the board on either side and you kill their blocker and attack your battle, you then just can't cast the battle because it exiles, then you have to cast it, and Censor says no. And
that's if you've cast a spell, right?
It's if you've cast a spell. Yeah. Battle flipping can't be your second. So I think that's just very poor design, but
Yeah. But I agree with what you said, and I'm actually happy with them so far in terms of gameplay. Again, not speaking to how strong they are strategically or as cards, but they make a mini game. They really do. Like when you go to combat, you have to think now, like, what's my plan? I need to make a decision early, particularly in decks that are looking to apply pressure a little more aggressively. As I said, in the value decks or the slow decks, I almost, unless I see a very clear line to get my opponent dead, I am defaulting to attacking battles and just generating value. And then it feels like, you do that a couple of times, like you said, it gets easier to flip them. And then, you can win the game pretty easily once you've transformed a couple battles. But overall, they seem to be a design success to me in the early stages, in that they actually matter. They do make you think. They do make combat interesting, and they are a bit of a mini game for yourself that you have to decide kind of which route you want to go down and when. And I think that already is cool. Now it's of course up to us to sort out which ones are actually really good and which ones aren't. Okay, what's next for our big picture stuff before we do the cracker packs?
So just on Synergy, this is a very complex format. There's a lot of moving parts. A lot of them interact with each other in cool ways. So I consider it a very high synergy format. And, as a result, you end up with lots of little mini combos and lots of things you have to think about. So definitely keep that in mind as you're playing and building.
Adam just texted me before we started the show, and he said, with no knowledge of the set, I'm jumping into a draft. Should be funny.
There we go.
And I was like, yeah, actually, because Adam's a seasoned drafter at this point. So for the most part, I would say, you'll pick it up pretty quick, but this one actually has a lot of sort of disheveled, like each thing is pretty interesting and seems to be working okay and has its own benefits, but like they don't really go together. It's just sort of like, it feels like a bunch of, this sounds like more negative than I mean it to be, but it feels like a bunch of leftover mechanics that kind of got put in a bowl and switched together. And it's like, dinner's ready. I don't know. It's a bit of a stir fry scenario.
That's because of the Multiverse Legends, the bonus sheet. There's like, of the 65, there's like 30 one-off mechanics, one card with a bolster, and the 10 companions, and one card that has rebound on it, like that sort of thing. And that kind of leads to that disparate feeling.
Definitely.
But it is a high synergy format. You do have to just a lot of emergent gameplay, a lot of combos that you might not realize initially. And then the last point, this is a big one. I think this is a lot of what we've seen people talk about. Is this a Prince or a Pauper set? Is it too bomby? And obviously, the set both has a lot of really powerful rares, and there's a lot of rares per pack thanks to the bonus sheet and the battles and all that stuff.
Yeah.
I haven't felt that that's really negatively impacted my play experience.
I want to push back. Yeah. I know that people think that this is like one of the bombiest sets we've ever seen. And of course I'm open to that emerging, but in the first, like I said, I've done 5 drafts, I think now. I've watched a bunch of yours on your streams. Yes, they do exist. It does not feel like the game ends when these bombs are cast. There's a few that are exceptions to that, but for the most part, I don't know. They feel like you can interact with them.
Well, there's a couple things going on here. One is that the uncommon and common removal is all pretty strong. You've got Deadly Derision, you've got Temporal Cleansing, you've got a lot of ways to deal with some of the more problematic cards. Like when your opponent plays Kenrith, right? The 5-mana 5/5, tons of abilities, excellent card, really hard to beat. But they're going to play it, and some amount of the time, you're just going to immediately kill it, and you're not going to be like, wow, I lost that bomb. And look, I understand there's Elish Norn Grand Cenobite, the 7-mana 4/7 that wipes your board and gives all your things +2/+2. Sunfall might be the best limited card we've seen in years.
Incredible.
And
it's
all that
Holly.
Stuff yeah,
it's like
all that stuff's true, but there's a lot of good interaction, and good interaction goes a long way.
It really does, and it can temper. It's interesting because it really does. This is why there's a difference between an A- and A and an A+, right? There's some bombs that, like the one you mentioned, also like the Angel, the Baneslayer Angel type card. These type of cards, you can 1-for-1 with them, right? And it's much different than a card like Atali or Elish Norn, like you said, that you usually can't, right? You kind of need a sweeper to get out of that mess, which, by the way, there are sweepers. Like those are a real thing. There's multiple.
Invasion of Fiora, there's Sunfall, there's Invasion of Karthus or whatever to deal 3 to all things.
There's the black, -1, -1 or -2.
Yeah, there's the glistening,
not a real
sweeper.
One. Yeah, but there's like the 3 sweepers. I mean, those do wipe away a lot of the board. And also, I think it's worth noting with bombs, and we have to keep an eye on the format. But if a card costs 7 or 8, I mean, it kind of needs to do that, right? Like if I spent 8 mana on any card in the game, my expectation is that it's approximately you win the game, like not literally on the spot, but like this should be a huge swing in your favor, right? Because there just are going to be times when those cards get stuck in your hand straight up. So if you have the demon, right, 5 black that tutors up stuff, or if you get to resolve that spell, like you should have a massive advantage, right? 7 mana, that's where it gets kind of interesting, because if that's popping up
I'd argue the demon costs like 5 mana, but there's other cards that have the same kind of thing you're talking about.
Yeah, and and so for me, it's like I know it feels kind of bad when somebody casts one of those, but man, if they got to 7 mana and got to play their card, it's kind of like, shouldn't this game be coming to an end at some point soon anyway? I don't know. It's one thing like Glorybringer, like that's an offensive bomb, right? Because that one's really difficult to not get nabbed by on some level, and it only costs 5, and it's a regular rare in its set. That's a lot. Like that's like, come on, guys. Like that's showing up way too often.
I will say you are describing Sunfall. I've found that card to be really frustrating because it's like, yeah, it's a Wrath. You can play around Wrath, and I've actually started to play around Wrath more after getting burned a bunch of times. I'm like, oh yeah, there's just tons of Wrath in this format.
Yes,
but the fact that it leaves behind a 5/5 or a 10/10 is just like, it just feels like this card is unbeatable in multiple ways. But
yeah, overall, but that might be the best card in the set, and that card might be too much. But we're talking about, Prince versus Pauper. Okay, there's going to be a couple of best cards, but is this really the type of format that it's making it unfun, that it feels oppressive how many bombs? And so far, no for me, even though the community seems to think differently, but that might change. Maybe I've just been running hot.
I mean, it's been no for me also. Like I overall think that this format has a lot of very strong cards for sure, but the fact that both players often have really good cards in their deck, so it's not like you're the only one who's playing these cards. B, there's a decent amount of good answers, and C, yeah, if your opponent gets to high mana value for this, to some degree they've had to work for that. Though this isn't the fastest format, so I do expect to hit 6 lands, a lot of the time. But yeah. Still, I have been really impressed. Like I've had a lot of fun playing this format, and I don't think that the bombs ruin it. They don't for me.
Yeah. One thing I want to talk about that's related to this point that I've noticed, at least in the early stages, again, subject to change, but from what I've seen, you can come back.
Oh, the wraths play into that. There's some wraths that help you come back. There is a lot of good options for coming back overall. Like there's like life gain, there's removal. There's the fact that sometimes you can have some good Convoke turns with like the instant speed Convoke cards. Ifara's Dispersal, the 2 and a blue bounce Surveil 2, but only costs 1 mana. Like I had a blue-white deck. This is the one I was telling you about earlier where I had 2 Rafts.
Yeah.
This deck had 2 Elspeth Smites and 2 or 3 Ifara's Dispersal. I could have even played a 4th. It was hard for this deck to get too far behind. That's not really how this deck played out, you know?
Yeah. And I've noticed that you can tip those scales. Like some of the games will play out where like you played a creature that has transform, you played a battle, so you're a little behind, right? And it feels like your opponent's starting to get you. But then like you pay the mana to transform the creature and then you attack the battle. And I was like, okay, well, they don't really have the blocks anymore. Now you flip a battle and all of a sudden the pendulum can start swinging back in your direction. And I've seen a lot of that where it like, not specifically the flipping a battle necessarily, but where things look pretty dire and then they can start to creep back in the other direction pretty significantly. So, for me, that's a feature. Like I wouldn't say I love like a super swingy format, but I love formats that give you that opening to come back. It's not over yet. You mentioned Convoke. That's a big part of it because let's face it, a lot of the games that end poorly for one player are because of mana issues, and Convoke is really good at like, okay, I played a 2-drop. I played another 2-drop, but I missed my land drop. But next turn I could play something that costs 4 mana, with Convoke and perhaps get myself out of it. It's one of the best features of Convoke. It's why Convoke is a really great mechanic. And any set that allows you to come back like that is really cool to me. Bombs probably have something to do with it too, right? If the card's so good, you're way behind Elish Norn. You're not way behind anymore. Play a big sweeper, like you said, that gets you back into it too. So this looks like it's going to be a fun one to commentate, like at the Pro Tour as well. Like if people are, swinging around and it's like ahead, way behind, those are really fun to commentate too.
Yeah. So I will say it kind of depends what you're trying to get to. Like when we say it's a Prince versus Pauper format, are we describing you have to have rares to compete? Because if in that case, almost everyone's going to have some amount of rares in their deck, right? Sure, your opponent might have better, you might have better, but it's not like they have 3 rares and you have none. If they have two good rares in your deck, I mean, your average deck has like 1 to 2 good rares, right? And it's just hard to avoid that. And then the other thing is there good gameplay? Is the format fun, or does it feel like the rares drown everything else out? They have not felt like they've done that to me. We can't tell anyone whether or not they're having fun. Like they're the ones who get to decide that. But overall, I have not found this format to be negatively impacted by how the rares are. I have a slight addendum to that, which I talked about on stream the other day. And this is more of a game design angle to it, which is the bonus sheet cards are pretty loud in terms of how they affect the games and what the games revolve around. It's a little weird to have cards reprints from old sets, not cards from the new set, being providing a lot of the texture of the games. And I do feel that that's where that's at right now.
Yeah, it does. I hadn't thought about that, but it's true. A lot of times these are some of the more important cards in your deck.
Yeah, and you typically want the new cards to be that more than the old ones, but that's again not like the biggest thing in the world.
Okay, well, why don't we crack some packs here, Luis? Now that we've got kind of the big picture under our belt, and then we'll dial back into a few of the mechanics and some of the archetypes. We're not going to go deep on any specific archetype just yet. We'll probably save that for next week, but we'll touch on a few that are possible. Okay, so our first March of the Machine Crack-a-Pack is our first card out is Bonded Herd Beast. This is the 4 and a green 4/5 beast. It's common, and you can pay 4 and a Phyrexian red to transform it at sorcery speed, and it becomes a 7/5 menace or something. I can't remember now.
Yeah, menace. I have yet to put this card in my deck, and when my opponents have played it, it's been kind of bad. I do think, despite the fact that this format's not the fastest in the world, you should avoid paying like 5 mana chonkers like this, because there's just too many ways to get punished. Like I like cheap stuff a lot more. I want my expensive cards to be a lot more impactful than this one is.
Yeah, definitely. Next up is Kite Sail. That's the 2 mana equipment, equip 2, and the creature gets +1/+0 and flying. I actually had a red-green deck, which is where we said that, this is the type of card that can sometimes fit in. I didn't fit it in. I had too much other good stuff. Feels to me, at least in the early stages, like it's the kind of card that you could imagine going into a deck, but doesn't make the cut.
Yeah, I think that Kite Sail is not at its best in a format where there's tons of good removal, which this format has. Temporal Cleansing and Volcanic Spite and like relatively cheap removal too. That really, it hurts to spend 2+2 mana for the first equip, and then it's only 2 for subsequent equips, but you still spent 4 on the first one, and when that creature gets killed or bounced, you feel it.
You definitely do. Urn of Godfire. That's the 1 mana artifact that filters mana for 2. And you can pay 6, tap it, and sack it to destroy a creature or enchantment. I haven't played with or against yet.
I regret to inform you that I'm not undefeated against Urn of Godfire, though the card is horrendously bad.
It might put it in the early front runner for a card that they play and you have to quit Magic. Next is Realmbreaker's Grasp. That's 1 and a white for an aura. It enchants an artifact or creature. The permanent can't attack or block, and its activated abilities can't be activated unless they're mana abilities.
This is our current pick because it's removal, but it's kind of mid. It's just, I still hate pacifisms. There's a lot of bounce and flicker type effects in the set, sacrifice stuff. Like when you're playing against red-black, this card's horrendous. You're going to put it on their creature and then they're just going to sack it.
For value,
I think that you can do a lot better.
Cosmic Hunger is the 1 and a green bite. It's instant, and your target creature you control deals damage equal to its power to another target creature, planeswalker, or battle.
Fine. It's okay removal. It's not something I'm really that interested in. I haven't found it to be critical. Like again, I would play this in my green deck. I just wouldn't go out of my way to pick these up super early. I just think there's better things you can be doing.
Yeah, like I said, I had that red green deck. I ran 2 Cosmic Hunger. They were good. That's its natural home.
Not going to be disappointed if you have a lot of creatures. I probably would take it over the Arrest though.
Oh, okay. All right.
I think I'd start, but I really hope not to take either of these.
Yeah, let's hope we can upgrade. Sigiled Sentinel is next. It's 2 and a white for a 2/2 Human Knight with backup 1 and Vigilance. This
has featured in a lot of the good fast draws. I lost today to turn 2 Botanical Brawler, turn 3 Sigiled Sentinel, and just completely just dominate.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the thing that you learn quickly is that anything that says backup on it is already pretty decent. And anything that says backup 2, by the way, is awesome. Like that's a massive difference. But yeah, this guy's okay. Shatter the Source is next. It's 5 and a red for an instant with Convoke. It's common, and it says choose 1. Shatter the Source deals 6 damage to target creature, planeswalker, or battle, or you can destroy an artifact.
This one's a little bit more too expensive for my tastes. Like you can play this card, but I'm not super in love with it.
Yeah, people have got me with it in blue-red, where they were looking to Convoke anyway, and you can get the cost down to like 3 or even cheaper, and then it ends up playing out all right. I think the first one in those type of decks is probably well worth it, and then they fall off pretty sharply. But like for example, in my red-green deck, I had an option for one of these and I didn't play it. Dreg Recycler is the 1 and a black 2/2 that you can tap it, sacrifice an artifact or creature, and drain your opponent for 1.
I play this card a decent amount, but
okay,
not because I think it's like an amazing card necessarily.
What are you feeding to it? Just random stuff?
Honestly, I think the deck I played it in the most is like blue-black, where I'm just convoking a ton, and I just will play almost every 2-drop. Like
I see. You just want a body.
When you have 5 or 6 Convoke cards, it's fine, and it has a relevant late game activated ability.
Yeah, it does. Our last common is Eyes of Gitaxias. This is the 2 and a blue sorcery incubate 3 draw card. Where are you at on this card?
It's okay. I don't love it, but basically my threshold for wanting to play Eyes of Gitaxias is, do I have a little bit of synergy with it? Like, do I have Wrath to draw a card? Do I do I care about spells? Am I playing with some other Phyrexians or token matters or incubate stuff. Like that's the kind of thing that I'm looking for when I'm putting Eyes of Gitaxias in my deck.
I've been trying to avoid it. Like maybe there's a play pattern that's better than the one that I imagined, but man, just running this thing out on turn 3 just feels terrible. You know, like you're getting kind of ran over. It's sorcery speed. You just tap out, do nothing, say go. And it's like, well, in the future, I'm going to have a much better life. So, yeah, you might if you're still alive. Pretty mana intensive card.
It's not a turn 3 play that's very good. So, I mean, it's overall 5 mana for a 3/3 and a card, which is okay, but I want a little bit more bang for my buck, you know?
That's how I feel. Uncommons. First one is Furnace Rains. That's the 2 and a red sorcery. Gain control of target creature until end of turn, untap it. It gains haste. And whenever this creature deals combat damage to a player or battle, you get a treasure token.
I've had really good results with this card, but I wouldn't first pick it.
Okay.
Basically, I think Black Red's a really good deck in this format. I've had it come together nicely. And in those decks, once you have a couple sack outlets, Furnace Range becomes a high pick. Also, the Make a Treasure clause is not throwaway text. When you take their 4/4 and attack them, if you have a sack outlet on the board, maybe they do some kind of block or trade because they know they're going to lose their creature anyway. Mm-hmm. But a lot of the time, your opponent's just not going to block it because they don't want to kill their own creature, and then you sack it, and it works out really, really well.
Oh yeah, that's pretty nasty. Only red-black for Furnace Rains?
That's the only time I've played it. I can't really imagine another color combination that could really make too good of use of it.
Mutagen Connoisseur. This is the 1 green blue 0/5 flying vigilance, and it gets +1/+0 for each transformed permanent you control. I have yet to see this go off in like an impressive way, but it is, you know, it buys you a lot of time as just a 0/5 flying vigilance to just sit there and give you time to start dumping mana into your transform creatures.
Look, in a surprising twist, the blue-green deck theme doesn't really work.
Like, come on, like just give me one, you know?
Yeah, so I'm not a big fan of it. I mean, I think I would play it in the decks that, you know, want to really need this sort of thing. Like they really need a big blocker and they have good ways to transform, but it's not really where you want to be.
We have 2 more uncommons. The rarities get weird with the battles and the bonus sheet, but we do have a battle. It's Invasion of Kaladesh. This is the blue-red uncommon battle. And when it enters the battlefield, you create a 1/1 colorless Sopter artifact creature token with flying. And it's got 4 defense. And what does it transform into again? Like a star X4
yeah. Vehicle with crew 1 that has power equal to number of artifacts, which is a 2/4 if you kept the original token and it counts itself.
Yeah.
Not an invasion I'm very impressed with. Like it's fine. In the blue-red Convoke deck where you'll play almost all your 2-drop creatures, yeah, you'd play this card. It's a 2-drop 1/1 flyer with upside. But I haven't found this one to be that impressive because even when you defeat the battle, you end up with kind of a mediocre thing at the end.
So where are we at right now? Like this pack has not been great.
I mean we're not. We're just not taking any of these cards, sorry.
Yeah. Okay. Well, we've got 2 more shots at it. So our next one is Shauna Cisse's Legacy. That's the green-white 0/0 that can't be the target of abilities your opponents control. And it gets +1/+1 for each creature you control. So you've got a 2 mana 1/1, but likely will be 2/2, 3/3, you know, pretty early in the game and can scale from there.
Yeah, that's fine.
This just isn't a gold card that's making me like want to jump into a guaranteed 2 color here, right?
No, it really isn't.
Let's see if our rare can bail us out. It's Dusk Legion Duelist. It's 1 and a white for a 2/2 vigilance. It's a vampire soldier. And it's a regular rare. Whenever 1 or more +1/+1 counters are put on Dusk Legion Duelist, draw a card. This ability triggers only once each turn.
This is a pretty good card. It's inroads into green-white for sure because that's where it has the most synergies. But it's a good 2-drop with upside. I don't mind just putting this card in my deck.
I would take it. This pack has been very disappointing. So let's see. Let's do another crack-a-pack and see if we can't pick up a little bit maybe of a closer pick. Our first card out of the second March of Machine crack-a-pack is Scoured Barrens. That's the gain land that is black and white. Seems fine. There's another Bonded Herd Beast. There is Acre Drinker. That's the black 1/1 with lifelink, and you can pay black and exile it from your graveyard to incubate 2 at sorcery speed. Where are you at on this one?
I like it. I played a lot. It's good in blue-black Convoke. It's good in red-black sack. It's good in white-black sack because if you have like the invasion of New Capenna and other things like that. Overall, I look again. I'm not going to second pick it, but it's a card that I've been impressed with.
2 bodies, cheap. Yeah, what's not to like? Searing Barb is 2 and a red for a sorcery. It does 2 damage to any target. If it's a creature, it can't block this turn, and you incubate 1.
Mediocre.
Mediocre. I've played this a couple of times, and it's just, man, being a sorcery is tough. Incubate 1 is like, oh, come on. It feels like every access that this has, it falls just a little short. It's a little too expensive. You wish it was an instant. You wish it did a little more damage. You wish it incubated a little higher. It's like just one of these things needs to be turned up for me, and then I would be on board. But when each one of these metrics is just falling a little short, the card just isn't quite there.
Yeah, I agree with that. I not been happy with the card. I tended to cut it.
Karsus Depth Guard is 2 and a red for a 4/3, and it has Defender, but if its power is 5 or greater, it loses Defender. I had a couple of shots to play this and decided not to because I had effectively no way to make it lose Defender permanently, like maybe a pump spell for 1 turn, but not like I just didn't have hope, to throw an equipment on it or something like that.
Yeah, I have not been impressed with it so far. It just feels like when it doesn't work, it's a disaster. Your 3-drop couldn't attack them. It's horrible. When it does work, you got an extra stat point out of it. Like it's a 4/3 instead of a 3/3, but I don't think that's worth the juice isn't worth the squeeze.
Yeah. I do wonder if there's a defensive minded deck that wants this, but I haven't had it yet with red being a primary color. Next is Gloomfang Mauler. This is the 5 black 5/5 backup to Menace with swamp cycling. This to me is actually why I think a lot of people feel that this format's bomb heavy is cards like this, just like a common. When this hits the battlefield, it is disgusting. Like it really hits hard. You actually get your 7 mana worth. And then the fact that it has swamp cycling means you can put it into, most, if not all decks that want swamps at all.
So I have cooled a little on the land cyclers. I think that they still have their place. Incubate really competes with them. You have a lot of ways to spend your mana, and I've been cutting land cyclers or not taking them very highly in draft, honestly. Like,
oh my God.
I just have felt like that's not the way to go. It feels like my early plays are too impacted. Like I always want to play a 2-drop. You've got the transform things. You've got this and that to do. And then in the middle of the game, incubate is often sucking up all the extra mana you have because it's like, oh, you picked up a couple incubates here and there. You might as well animate them. So that leaves the land cyclers as fine 6-drops. The white one especially, I think, is good when you cast it on 6. And look, I play the Gloomfang Mauler, like the black one. It's good. It like a huge impact on the board. But they're closer to just being cast than cycling as a little more to than what I thought. I think they're all playable. I think they're all fine. They do help with splashes. They are decent inclusions in your deck, but they are less impressive than I thought they were going to be.
Man, next week you're going to tell us that Skittering Surveyor sucks, huh?
No, I'm not going to do that. Skittering Surveyor, it has remained great.
Okay, yeah, man. Like you said, these when you do like in lieu of a 7 mana bomb, a card like Gloomfang Mauler does a pretty good stand-in. Like it's like, dang, I'm going to take a ton of damage from this thing now. The turn you play it because of backup, and then also, by the way, it's a 5/5 menace left over. Nice way to clean up a long game. Fertilid's Favor is the 3 and a green instant. Target player searches their library for a basic land card, puts it on the battlefield tapped, and then shuffles, and you put 2+1/+1 counters on up to 1 target artifact or creature. This card does have a lot going on, especially at instant speed, and I just never play it. I'm like, nah.
Yeah, I think that the card is a little better than it looked. It's actually, let me see. It was winning more than I thought it was on 17 lands.
Okay.
But overall, I think that it's not a card I'm going to prioritize or anything. But
it does feel like it's trying to do two very, very different things.
Its win rate's actually, hold on.
Please say it's bad.
It's above average, but it's not great or anything.
What's its percent?
56.1.
Okay, that's barely above average. That's like,
it's like I said, it's not a fantastic card or anything like that.
Pretty bad. Furtive Analyst is 2 and a blue for a 1/4 vigilance, and you can pay 2 and tap it to loot. Draw a card and then discard a card.
Not a big fan of this one. It's just too expensive to use the loot.
Yeah. I put 2 of these in a 5-color deck that I drafted as a plan for when I couldn't cast stuff, and it's an okay blocker. But yeah, not great.
I mean, it is an okay blocker, but that's about all you can say about it.
Well, I mean, when you're playing like, literal just whatever the best card out of every pack is, being able to loot's actually pretty nice because sometimes you get a little stuck with cards in your hand. Scroll Shift. This is a 2 and a white instant. Exile up to 1 target artifact, creature, or enchantment you control, then return it to the battlefield under its owner's control, and you draw a card. Haven't played with or against yet. Where are you at on Scroll Shift? Is it a thing I need to care about?
I mean, it's a playable card if you have a bunch of good ETBs. It's not a card I heavily prioritize, and I have actually had to cut it from my deck a decent amount of the times.
I mean, it's
just a little disappointing,
That's the classic Scroll Shift story. Looks like it would be good. Couldn't make room. Marauding Dreadship is 2 and a red for a 4/1 haste vehicle, and its crew cost is 2. And when it enters the battlefield, you incubate 2.
This one I like. It hits pretty hard. It gives you good pieces of material for red black. Overall, I've been pretty happy with the Dreadship.
Yeah, it's actually decent.
There's boards where it's not crazy. It's just okay, but overall, I think it is quite good.
Yeah, and the 4 power is a lot. And, one thing you always want to think about with your vehicles is that there are scenarios where you play it and would like to be able to block right away. It gives you a little bit of redundancy against removal. And a 4 power blocker trades with a ton of stuff. And, of course, if you're slamming with it with haste, you could be taking down a battle or just winning. Corrupted Conviction is black instant. As an additional cost to cast it, you sacrifice a creature, and it draws you 2 cards.
I like this in red black, especially if you have Furnace Rains. You basically get the card for free. Like it's not a card you have to pick early by any stretch.
Right. Uncommons, we've got Tetsuko Umezawa in our bonus sheet slot. That's the 1 and a blue 1/3 that makes creatures you control with power or toughness 1 or less unblockable.
Yeah, I like Tetsuko a lot. It's a lot better than it looked. We said in the Multiverse Legends review, this card plays a lot better than you might think. Just attacks battles, gets in for damage, makes your 3/1s into real threats. This is not a terrible card to first pick, honestly.
Yeah, so let's stop there because that is our first uncommon and the bonus sheet card. That is the pick, right? It's like that or the Gloomfang Mauler, or I don't know if you're crazy, you take Scoured Barons or something.
No, I would probably take Tetsuko. I don't think it's completely wild to take Scoured Barons. I'm not confident of that yet. You give me another week. Next week, I'll be able to tell you. There have been formats like Original Cons where, because the gain lands are so good.
They're
lands
so
that enter the build tap for 2 colors and gain a life. When you play a deck full of those, like the 5-color, like you said, all the best cards out of every pack deck, when you have 9 gain lands in your deck and you just gain 3 to 4 life a game extra, that is a huge advantage. It might not sound like much, but it is. Sometimes it's just worth first picking those lands and going over basically everything but the most premium stuff and going for that deck. I'm not convinced that we're there yet, but it is something to think about. As of right now, I'd probably take Tetsuko.
Yeah, and and to be clear, we have not seen anything premium out of this pack. Like this is all just middling stuff. Next uncommon is Zarek's Strobe Knight. This is the 2 and a blue 2/2 flying vigilance, and you can tap it to create a 2/2 white and blue night creature token with vigilance, but you can activate it only if you've cast 2 or more spells this turn.
Love the Strobe Knight.
Card's awesome.
Yeah.
Convoke Dream.
Yeah, I think this card is is quite strong. It almost always gets in for 2, and then it makes a night. Like, it's not like you even have to be super dedicated to double spelling. Like, if you're drafting a deck with a low enough curve, you just be able to cast 2 spells.
Yeah, and Convoke helps a lot with that, at least getting 1 double spell turn off. Yeah, card's great. Definitely would take it over anything else here. We did get another Furnace Reigns for our next pick. Like, there's no argument to taking Furnace Reigns and wheeling the Corrupted Conviction or something, right? Like, that's just too.
I don't think that's the way I would go about it.
I wouldn't either. Just take the good stuff, right? I mean, these are both cards that could wheel.
Yeah.
Our rare, or shall I say, mythic rare, is Invasion of Tarkir.
Mm-hmm.
Let me actually bring that one up here because that way I can flip it over, which I haven't been able to do. Invasion of Tarkir says, so it's 1 and a red, 5 defense. When it enters a battlefield, reveal any number of dragon cards from your hand. When you do, it deals X plus 2 damage to any target, where X is the number of cards revealed this way. But X can be 0, so it's 2 mana to do 2 damage. And if you happen to have a dragon, you might get to do 3 every once in a while. That's how it'll realistically play out. And if you get those
4, right? It's 2 damage per dragon, I think.
Oh, is it? Where X is the number of cards.
Oh no, it is just. Oh, I thought it was 2 damage to that per dragon. It's only 1.
Yeah,
that's disappointing.
X plus 2. Yeah. Well, I mean, the good news is you never have a dragon in your hand anyway. So.
Sure.
But if you can get the 5 defense down, it becomes Defiant Thundermaw, which is a 4/4 flying trample dragon that whenever a dragon you control attacks, so whenever this thing attacks, it does 2 damage to any target. We have a winner.
Yep. I mean, the best comparison for Invasion of Tarkir is a Bone Crusher Giant, where you spend 2 mana to deal 2 damage, but it leaves behind a pretty good sort of potential. The Bone Crusher is a lot better. Obviously, Bone Crusher is a ridiculous card, but this is still like, if I play a 2-drop and you go Invasion of Tarkir, kill your 2-drop, I feel like I got a really bad end of that exchange.
Yes.
At some point, you might flip the invasion into like a bomb.
Totally. It's also worth noting that like certain colors are better at flipping battles than others, and red might be the best. Like red and green seem to be the most well suited. They have the biggest creatures. They have the most haste. They also have cards that specifically say like if this is hitting a battle, or when they reward you for attacking battles. So, the fact that this is red means that you're even that much more likely to actually get it transformed. And this one really incentivizes you to. I mean, you get a near bomb level card if you can take it out. So
yes, I would. Yeah. If I started with Invasion of Tarkir, I would be looking like biasing towards red green. I wouldn't be slamming it, but I would be biasing towards it for sure.
That's right. So that would be the pick quite easily. Although I would be sad to pass the Xerix guy. Like that card's sweet, but yeah, this one's better. Okay, so we mentioned it a few times throughout the Crack-A-Pack, Sarah Louise. I mentioned I had drafted it. You said you have a couple of times. 5 color, you can do it. Yeah. Like it, I can tell you straight away already. It is a thing. It is on the table. I have not figured out how good it is, how often you should do it, but the tools are there.
So basically the idea behind 5 colors is you get the lands, you get Skittering Surveyor. That's a huge one, and you're able to like you said, play the best cards out of most of the packs, and be really happy with the fact that you get, especially in a format with lots of bombs. You get, in multicolor ones, there's all these gold legends. You get to like use again Surveyor, Blighted Burgeoning, and the duels are the best. Like Surveyor is really good, but taking duels over almost anything that isn't a bomb or a cheap removal spell is kind of how you get in there. Sweepers are great in the deck, and you're just trying to out card quality them over and over again, basically.
Yeah, mine was blue, green based, heavily green, good chunk of blue, and then everything else I would call splash level. That worked pretty well for me. There's just enough blockers. Blue has enough tempo or removal level stuff to kind of keep your opponent off balance so that you can start deploying the big hitters. And then, I think that the land cyclers are really good in this deck. Like not only do they help fix your mana, but they give you something to do with your 7 mana when you get to that point, because the deck's kind of designed to do that. You can think of it as kind of bookends, right? Like you have the stuff that you're doing at the beginning to ramp you up, and then you have the stuff at the end to pay you off. And the middle part gets a little bit lighter on decks like this because, it's not really enough to be like, all right, I spent the picks, the mana, the tempo loss to play this, enchantment and stuff to fix my mana, and now I'm going to cast a pretty solid 4-drop. It's like no.
Beast.
Yeah, your 4s and your 5s kind of lose a little luster, and you want to start slamming some like gold 6-drops or hit a 7 that wins the game or something like that. But it does seem to be a viable archetype, and of course you mentioned it. But one of the things that you're really taking advantage of, sort of system like, from a draft basics level, is that you get to play more of your picks than your opponents. When you spend 5, 6, 7, 8 picks on your tap lands, on your gain lands, I mean, you get to play all of those cards. It looks a little weird when you do that because you'll get to the end and you're like, all right, what cuts do I need to make? And your sideboard will be like 5 cards. You're like, oh man, yeah. I'm really playing everything. But that's an advantage that you get that your opponents don't. Also, I want to refocus on what you said before, Luis, about, unless it's premium, you just take the gain land. That is really important. When you've done this right, when you know that you were an adult, ate your vegetables, and even though there is a pretty darn good card in the pack, not a bomb, not premium, but like a good card, and you're like, nope, I'm going to take the gain land, is when you get to pack 3 and it's just about to show up on your screen or in front of you in your hands, and you can pick whatever the heck you want. You're just like I hope that this pack is filled with strong cards. And I mean like pack 3, pick 1, pick 2, pick 3, just strong cards. That's all I care about because I can basically cast anything. That's when you know you did it right. When you get to pack 3 and you're like, man, I got all these strong cards, but I don't think I can cast them. You're doing it backwards. You might get bailed out and because you're at that spot where you're like, I don't care what's in the pack. I'm taking a duel or a fixing or whatever. That's when, you've put yourself in a bit of a precarious position. So eat your vegetables on pack 1 and pack 2, and dessert is coming in pack 3. I guarantee it. It's great. What about Convoke? We touched on it a little bit earlier about how Convoke can help, get you out of a mana screw situation, but man, they seem to have picked some really powerful stuff for Convoke this time around.
I think all the Convoke cards are great. Actually just all of them. The strategy I've really been liking is blue-black or blue-red, tons of cheap creatures, and then as many temporal realities, or the 3 in a blue, put a permanent on the second from the top or second from the bottom, and Meeting of the Minds. Temporal Cleansing.
That card's good, man. Every time somebody plays it against me and it gives you that little dialogue, I'm like, I don't like either of these options very much.
I 7-0'd today with 5 of those in my deck. I was a blue-black deck with tons of 1 and 2 mana creatures, 5 of those in the Artistic Refusal, the 4 blue counterspell, draw 2, discard 1 with Convoke. And I just like all of them. I just feel like all of them really do the thing you want. And I've been really impressed with kind of how well that those all play out. What you're looking for when you're playing Convoke is, unsurprisingly, Convoke spells and cheap creatures. And that's basically it. Preening Champion is the absolute best. That's 3 mana 2/2 flyer that makes a 1/1. Like, imagine a 3 mana 2/2 flyer that's also a Soul Ring.
Yeah.
That's what it's got going on. I mean, it's obviously that's a bit of an exaggeration, but if you just go, 1 drop, whether it's like the black 1/1 lifelink or the Scorn Berserker, or the 0/1 with backup, or the Captive Weird blue for a 1/3 that transforms, any of those into 2-drop into turn 3, you're like play another 2-drop plus Meeting of the Minds, draw 2. Like next turn, you just get to curve out, dump your whole hand, redraw with Meeting of the Minds and Artistic Refusal, and then interact with them with Temporal Cleansing. And I've found that deck to be very impressive, and I think the win rates of those cards are appropriately quite high.
Do you cut lands?
I really haven't been. I've just been playing 16 or 17, I haven't gone lower than that.
Because you can't miss a drop. Like, you need to get those cards on board, right?
You still need to get to turn 3 on 3, and you really don't mind playing extra lands. Like, honestly, the more often than not in Limited these days, it just feels like you're better off just playing 17 lands a lot of the time. And sometimes you play 16. If you have 2 land cyclers and a low curve and all that, that's fine. But missing a land drop is a lot worse than drawing 1 too many lands.
Yes.
Or 2 too many lands.
For sure.
So that's something to really just keep in mind as you're drafting here.
Yeah, every time they put Convoke in a set, it makes me want it to be more evergreen than it is. It just plays so well. Like there's no complaints. It helps you get ahead when you're sort of pushing an advantage, but it also helps you come back from being behind. It's interesting. It's flexible. It almost, I wouldn't do this, but it almost feels like Convoke should just be on everything. Like I'm sure there's some card game where you can use your, everything is Llanowar Elf or whatever, but it just vibes with the game and makes you really be able to fit in, casting more spells, and it makes the games feel a little more exciting. The last thing I wanted to mention, Luis, was a play pattern that I've noticed early on. Could be just early days in the format, but I was like, I don't think this is the right way to do this, but people seem to be doing it, which are the transform cards. I've noticed that people are very all in on them. They'll play like a transformer on 2 and just dump 3 mana into it, or play a 3-drop transform and then, shortcut it on turn 4. And they're just like, I'm hitting you. And when they did it at first, I was like, oh no, I'm kind of screwed here. Cause you feel way behind when they do that. But then I was like, oh, I have a removal spell, right? And they just dump 7 mana into this one threat that is very threatening. But if I kill it, it's gone. And I wanted to know if you had noticed that play pattern coming out and what your thoughts on that were.
I think that one of the best heuristics people can use, because I do agree people seem to transform way too aggressively, is think of most of the time transforming being the thing you do when you run out of things to cast from your hand.
That's a good way.
Because most of the time it's better to just put something on the board. No, that's not always the case. I think one really critical one is the black Phyrexian that makes a sapling when it flips. Like that's the sort of thing where you can really justify transforming it, especially if you're going to then convoke something out or whatever. But for most of them, you're better off waiting. Like, especially like the ones that cost 4 plus a Phyrexian. Yeah. Those are just the most brutal to get owned by some kind of removal or bounce or what have you. And basically, think about it this way. Would you rather cast another card from your hand, another creature, or put an aura on the creature you have in play? Because what you're doing when you're transforming is basically putting a free aura. It doesn't cost you a card in hand, but it's an aura. You're just casting an aura on that creature. Yeah. And a lot of the time, that's just not a very good play. And in fact, I find myself being pretty happy when my opponents spend their time transforming on turns 3 and 4 most of the time. I do too. It's funny because it doesn't feel good at first, and then you realize that like, oh, actually, I'm good with this. Like, keep doing that, please. And then they end up being stuck with a bunch of cards in their hand and all that. All right, yeah. The one I had was I curved out, and then they go to transform their card on turn 3, and I had the collective nightmare to give it -3/-3 with Convoke, just tapping all my creatures because I was playing black red and went 1-drop, 2-drop, 3-drop. That's dirty. So they thought, well, at least the way is clear, and I'll get my hit in with my. Yeah, well, that's another thing to note, by the way. The way is often not clear. They could have cut short. They could have aerial boost. They could have collective nightmare. You got to watch out for all of these cards. Absolutely. I think that this is a time when watching your stops. I don't like this aspect of the game as it's played online, to try to figure out what your opponent has based on the mana they have available and if the game is stopping for them. But man, if they're tapped out and it's stopping, they have something, right? Like they have a Convoke spell that's an instant. Like you kind of just can't overlook that, as much as, again, it's not really a fun part of playing on Arena or whatever. But yeah, you can see that coming. Overall, format seems sweet, like swingy, synergistic, powerful. I've been really enjoying it too. Like I can't wait to jump back in. Let's just say I'm going to be doing some scientific research on the 5-color deck from now until next week, just for our listeners' sake, to make sure that we know all the ins and outs and that it's good. Also, so we can give people a little more advanced notice than normal. I think we're going to have the showdown next week. Everyone but one person has confirmed. So I'm not gonna give you any guesses. Does this mean that I should fire up Discord? Is that the or Messenger? I also messaged you the Council of the Resources. Me, you, and BK. Do that?
Oh,
earlier
okay.
today.
I see that now. Okay. Well, that was today. So
This is how I find out Marshall just ghosts me on all platforms here live on the podcast.
I mean, it's a mute button, like you're a coworker, I can't be.
Right. I'm enough drafts in to give an initial verdict on the format. And my initial verdict is that I am enjoying this format a lot and it's got a lot of cool stuff going.
Okay. Well, we're going to have more details next week for you. Of course, we'll be diving a little deeper into some of the archetypes and cards and stuff that we found good, bad, and indifferent. And we're excited to do the research needed to bring you that. That's going to do it for this episode of the show. Thanks so much for hanging out with us. If you want to find us on social media, I'm Marshall_LR and Luis is LSV. Pretty much everywhere you can find everything related to the podcast over on lrcast.com. All the episodes of the show, links to our streams and everything else. And we want to say thank you once again to our patrons, everybody who supports us on Patreon. Link in the show notes for that if you would like to become one of those people. With that, enjoy drafting March of the Machine, and we'll see you next week.
So while we're talking about March of the Machine, I've got there's a couple combos that you're trying to assemble, right? So like here's like the bingo card. Here's some of the combos I'm going to try to do over the course of the format. We'll see how I end up doing. One, of course, is Yargle plus Multani, plus the Voldaren, like Thrill Seekers. I think the Fling, where you back up 2, make it a 20 power, and just sack it to deal 20 to your opponent. Requires playing 3 colors and playing Yargle and Multani, but that's not at the end of the world. You've also got, and this one I've already done, Chrome Host Seed Shark, the 3-mana 2/4 Shark Typhoon Shark, plus Artistic Refusal, and I was actually playing.
Which one's Artistic Refusal again?
The 6-mana Convoke Cryptic Command, counter, draw 2. Okay. I was actually playing against Seth Manfield earlier, and
just randomly
on Arena, and then managed to go 1-drop, 2-drop, 3-drop, and then turn 4 just passed, and Artistic Refusal to Seize Shark. He just scooped right on the spot.
Amazing! Yes. So you beat a Hall of Famer, is what you're saying.
One of the Hall of Famer was going to lose in that match, one way or the other. You've also got the Invasion of Fiora, the Wrath that kills legendary or non-legendary or both. And the dream there is to kill all non-legendary creatures, then attack it with your legend and flip it right away.
Yeah, set it up. I love that.
Another good dream that I hope to accomplish is to play Hitotsugu and Kairi, our preview card, and flip one of your 6-mana spells, one of your Convoke spells. I actually managed to flip Artistic Refusal earlier as well. That was pretty fun.
So what are the modes on it? Counter something or? Well,
it didn't counter anything, but it dealt 6 to my opponent and drew 2 cards, which was pretty good.
You needed to get a counter in there too to really.
Okay. I'm sorry to disappoint you. And I mean, there's a lot of cool stuff going on in this format, and I'm excited to kind of keep digging into it, but yeah, we'll see how many of the dreams we end up living. I know you've already played Invasion of Alara, so that was like a gimme. That's like the center bingo square for you.
It is,
like there's no world where that's in the format with the gain lands.
No.
And you don't run it. So
no, the first time I saw it, I took it and I played it. So yeah.
And then the last one, of course, is to companion as many of the companions as possible. Some aren't good. Some are basically impossible. I think like Zerda is like literally impossible to companion unless you just played all spells or something. I just
don't know how you'd have playables. Yeah.
Yeah. But a lot of cool dreams to be lived in the set, and I look forward to doing them hopefully in the showdown.